Hi guys, James at Rampant Lion Reviews again for you today with another beer review. For this one, we are going to stick to Japan and we're going to return to a brewery that's featured on the channel a couple of times before. So I've had some really nice beers from these guys over the years, a couple of different styles, and if people were to ask me about this brewery, I would say that they are just very solid all round. Now, the beer that we're going to have a look at today is a variant of one that I reviewed on the channel a couple of years ago. It's actually been about 5 years that since I reviewed a beer from these guys, according to my YouTube stuff. The only reason for that is that I kept seeing the same ones from them, never really anything new during my previous visits to Japan, but finally we found this one. But it's one of their latest releases. It's a style that I know this brewery can do very, very well, and I've heard very good things about this beer too. So needless to say, I'm very, very curious to see what this beer is going to have in store for us. Hopefully it's another good beer. Hopefully it makes for an interesting review, and as always, I hope that you guys watching enjoy my take on this one as well. So yeah, for this review then, we are going to head a little bit north of me here in Osaka up to Aichi Prefecture in the city of Nagoya, and we're going to have a look then at my first beer in a long time from Y Market Brewing. So this particular beer is called Super Hysteric IPA. It comes in at 7.5% ABV, and this one has been classed as an American IPA on Untappd. So when we use the term American IPA, what we really mean, I guess, is that this beer is somewhere between a New England hazy and a more kind of oily and bitter West Coast IPA. And yeah, there's quite a few breweries using that more generic American IPA term for their beers these days. But we reviewed the original Hysteric IPA a couple of years ago, and I think that one was more of a kind of bitter and oily West Coast IPA. But from the pictures I saw of this one on Untappd, it actually looks a little bit more like a New England hazy, in fact. So we'll just need to see how we get on with it. 7.5% ABV, and apparently it is the highest IBU beer that Y Market Brewing have ever produced. I calculated IBU of 104, I think it was, they said. So yeah, this should be really quite interesting. But this is yet another beer that I picked up at the wonderful liquor shop Asahiya in Taishibashi Maichi here in Osaka. A lovely little beer shop run by Koji, but mainly his daughter Rika these days, because Koji is getting a little bit older, and they've always got a great selection of Japanese stuff. So if you find yourself in Osaka, that is somewhere that I really do recommend you go and visit. But yeah, let's crack on with this one then and see what the beer is going to have in store for us. So, as always with my reviews, I'll tell you a little bit about the brewery before we taste the beer. If you want to get straight to the tasting though, just fast forward. All the usual links can be found in the video description below. That's the brewery website, the link to my other reviews that I've done from Y Market Brewing before, and hopefully we can add some more to that list in the not too distant future. I don't want to leave it another 5 years before I review another beer from these guys, but hopefully we see some new things. But there's all the usual social media down there. If you want to see more reviews, do please consider subscribing to the channel. The support that you give is massively appreciated, and remember, you can go into the channel homepage and search for beer using the geography tagging system. You can go in there and search for beer using the little search bar, put in your hometown, state, county, province, whatever you like. If I've reviewed beers from the area that you search for, they will pop up. Failing that though, you can check out the playlist of beers from different countries. You'll find this one in the Japanese playlist along with a number of other things. That's being added to very regularly, of course, because I'm over here in Osaka regularly, and we do get a good selection of Japanese beer in Hong Kong as well. But yeah, do make sure you check out the playlist of beers from other countries too, because there are some very interesting things on the channel these days. But yeah, let's go on to my brewery notes then, and I'll tell you a wee bit about Y Market Brewing once again then. So, Y Market Brewing, as I've mentioned to you already, are based in Nagoya in Aichi Prefecture, which is about halfway up the main island of Honshu in Japan, and it's part of the same company, the same parent company that owns Okadaya Liquors, which is run by Yasuhiro Yamamoto. So they started out with a small brew house in the Yanagibashi market, hence the name Y Market Brewing, which was mainly composed of food and drink wholesale businesses that supplied the various restaurants around the city. So in the early days, they hired Kachi Makoto to come in as the head brewer, and he'd previously worked for Kisoji Beer in southern Nagano, and he got into home brewing after discovering craft beer while living in Montreal in Quebec over in Canada. So they opened their brew pub in March of 2014, which is on the second floor of the brewery. So yeah, in this case, the brewery's downstairs, and the little pub and restaurant and things is upstairs. But they started out with just a very small 1,000 litre brewing system that Catchy actually designed themselves. But over the years, they've been gradually building up their market and their brewing capacity and developing new beers. They still operate the original brewery and tap room, which is Y Market Brewing Kitchen. And they've now got a larger production brewery in the Nishi ward of the city, which also has an on-site tap room. But I think that tap room only has about 8 taps or something at the moment, but I believe they've got plans to make it a little bit bigger going forward. But they directly run a few different venues, which includes Craft Beer Keg, the Yanagibashi Terrace, and also craft restaurant Nagaroba. All of those can be found in Nagoya-shi, Nagoya City, and they've also got Yale Ale Gifu, which can be found in Gifu City in Gifu Prefecture. But as of October 2024, according to Untappd, these guys have produced about 590 different kinds of beer, and we're just looking at their website, there's a whole host of different styles in there. I saw Scotch ales, Imperial Stouts, and you name it, these guys have had a go at it. But yeah, here in Osaka, I only tend to see a couple of their beers, and it's mainly the IPAs. The Hysteric IPA seems to have been a very, very popular one, and I've seen that a few times actually in Liquor Shop Asahiya. So I think I need to go to Nagoya and try and get a few of the different beers from these guys. The last one I think we reviewed from them was actually one of their Christmas releases, which was was it a Weizenbock, if I remember rightly, and that was quite an interesting beer. But yeah, we will try and review a few more beer styles from these guys going forward. But yeah, that is everything I can really tell you about Y Market Brewing for the moment. If you want to learn more about this brewery, you can check out the brewery website, you can follow them on Facebook and Instagram to keep up to date with all the latest goings on, and you can check out the Rate Beer, Untappd and Beer Advocate pages to learn a little bit more about all the different beers that these guys have done. And hopefully we can get up to Nagoya at some point soon and go and visit the original brewery and tap room. I think that would be really cool. We can maybe do a little bit in their other places as well. It'd be quite cool to do a round of the Y Market Brewing venues in Nagoya. So yeah, let's go on and actually have a little look at the beer itself then. I'm really curious about this, as I mentioned. But yeah, you can see the artwork on this one is quite interesting. It's a little bit Japanese gangstery, I would always say. You see, there's quite a few of the clothing designers and stuff I've noticed, and the Japanese brands use a style of artwork like this. It must have a name. I'm not the most artistically literate person in that sense. I'm more into my music and things, of course. But there you can see the classic Y Market brewing symbol there. This can, incidentally, is 370 millilitres. You can see plain silver top on it there, and like I mentioned earlier, this one comes in at 7.5% ABV, and it seems to have been dubbed just simply American IPA. So yeah, there are some details about the hops in this beer. A few of them are cryo, so there is Simcoe, Citra and Chinook in this one. I believe all of those were in cryo form, but there was a little bit of Citra or Simcoe pellet in there too. Motueka from New Zealand is in there, and also Mosaic. So yeah, Simcoe, 12% alpha acid. It's going to give you mainly a kind of passion fruity type flavour. Citra is 14% alpha acid, American again. It's got a lot of juicy mango, but a bit of grapefruit and peach behind it, and sometimes a kind of lemon limey type character, particularly in the more hazy IPAs. Chinook is of course one of your classic bittering hops, a lot of grapefruit and a lot of kind of pine resin, 14% alpha acid as well, if I'm not mistaken. Motueka, the New Zealand hop, 8% alpha acid and quite a juicy limey character. Then Mosaic is American again, 14% alpha acid, and it tends to give you a wee bit of distinctive earthiness, but also quite a lot of tangerine. So yeah, a good variety of hops in this one. I'm not sure if it's the same hop varieties that are in the regular Hysteric IPA, honestly can't remember. But yeah, like I said, the idea behind this one is that it's brewed with a higher IBU count, which is 104, if I'm remembering the number correctly. The highest IBU beer that Y Market Brewing have ever produced, apparently. So yeah, let's get this guy out into the glass then and see what it's all about. I'm very curious about this one, like I said. So let's do this. I'm seeing then it has a bit of haze to it, that, doesn't it? Yeah, okay. That looks pretty nice, I have to say. So, before the head disappears on this one, then we can see that the beer has poured with just a little bit over a finger of a frothy, I would say kind of cream coloured head there. The bubbles on the surface of the liquid are actually quite small, and the head gets a little bit kind of soapier the further up that you go. If you look at that, it looks really, really nice, I have to say. But yeah, you've got a lovely kind of, it's actually quite an ambery colour, this one, I have to say. It has got a decent little bit of haze to it, but maybe a little bit more kind of natural and unfiltered rather than being all out soupy and gloopy. I think you can see it quite nicely through, I'm seeing it on the viewfinder on the camera, of course. But yeah, it does look pretty nice, this one. One or two bubbles sticking toward the side of the glass there, a few little ones going up toward the bottom of the head. But overall, it looks pretty nice, and you can see the level of opacity or opaqueness. I'm never sure which word to use. You can see that if I put my hand behind the glass there. So it looks pretty nice, this one. Remember, the colour of your beer depends on a few things. One, the type of malts that you use. This goes a long way to determining your EBC rating. Two, length of your wort boil is going to play a role, because the longer you boil the wort, the more the sugars caramelise, unless you get a darker colour of beer. But any barrel aging that you do or adjuncts you put into the beer will affect its colour as well, but you don't really have to care about that very often when it comes to the IPA style umbrella. So yeah, one or two little tiny bits of sediment floating in this one. Maybe I've got the fridge set a little bit too low, in honesty, but yeah, it might have been that the can was also there for a little bit at Koji's, but they did say it was pretty fresh, actually. But yeah, appearance wise, nothing particularly surprising about this beer when you consider what IPAs look like, in honesty. Yeah, I do wonder if there's a little bit of wheat and oat in this one, just with the level of haze that it has. And of course, in hazy IPAs, it's the yeast, the oats, and the wheat that determine the level of haziness that you get. But yeah, it's certainly not the soupiest and gloopiest. It looks more like a kind of natural haze in a sense, so not too much wheat and oat in this one, I guess, which is probably why it's termed American IPA rather than hazy IPA. But yeah, I think we've said everything we need to about the appearance. The head is just fading away to be a kind of more thinner foamy layer now, and you've got that ring around the edge of the glass. But I think we can go on and have a little look at the nose on this one. So yeah, I'm quite curious about this. Ooh, it does smell quite nice. I will say straight away, it doesn't give the impression of being madly bitter. It's actually quite soft and quite juicy in a sense. So it's hiding that bitterness quite well, because usually you've got quite a little bit more dankness to the beer if it's over 100 IBUs. But it could be that the cryo oil actually is suppressing that a little bit. We'll need to see. But it smells really nice. It smells like quite an oily IPA, this one. I'm getting a lot of orange out of it on first impression, so the mosaic is really coming to the fore in this one, I have to say. But you do get a wee bit of that stronger green component that you'd maybe associate with Chinook, actually. But a lovely aroma, I have to say that straight away. And it is a little bit more leaning, the aroma for me leans a little bit more toward the west coasty side of things, actually, because of the oiliness that it has. So yeah, interesting stuff. But let's have a wee look at the aroma a bit more in depth. We'll break it down and describe it for you more in depth, as we always do. So the backbone of the beer then, for me, you've got a lovely little bit of that kind of fresh bread crust in there. I'd say it's more of a brown bready leaning bread crust in this case. So a little touch of woodiness, little touch of kind of cracker as well, I would say. Yeah, you're always getting that in the kind of base of these beers, but for me, there's a good mix of bread in this one. It's actually like quite a sweet brown bready character that that comes out of this beer. So yeah, lovely kind of sweet brown bready notes in it. Yeah, brown bready bread crust in there, cracker wood, as I said, quite a bit of sweet brown bread, good little bit of white bready character coming out of this one too. So yeah, sweet brown bread in there, a fluffier and slightly sweeter white bready note to it as well, and then yeah, I think the way that this goes together is it's quite nice. Yeah, it's quite a bready leaning. IPA, this one, in honesty, and I wonder if it's American two-row malts that are in here. And I think there might be a bit of German though, because the breadiness actually shows you a little bit of oiliness, which is something I would really associate with the American two-row malts. But it also has a wee bit of dryness, which is what I'd associate more with the kind of European or German malts specifically. So maybe it's a German base malt with a little bit of a sweeter American malt on top of that. Would be very curious to know. I don't know which one is actually cheaper to import into Japan, in all honesty. Maybe the European ones, because they've now got the trade deal, of course. But yeah, it's just me speculating. But as I say, be very curious to see the brew sheet of this one and see exactly what they're using. But yeah, the breadiness is quite sweet, but you get a bit more dryness out of it the more that you smell of the beer. You can smell a more dense white bready character to this too, which to me is usually an indicator that wheat is being used in there. And the wheat is actually, it has a little bit of bite further back on the nose, which makes me think European wheat. American wheat is that little bit smoother. But then the oats that come out of this one as well, you do get a little bit of that oatiness there. The oats are quite creamy almost, although they are showing a little bit of dryness. And remember that in an IPA, if you use oats can be a rough indicator of how fresh your IPA is. Essentially, the fresher the beer is, the creamier they are. The older the beer is, the drier they are. So yeah, the oatiness in this one is quite smooth as well. So that makes me think European oats as well, rather than American oats, because American oats are a bit more kind of porridgey, in honesty. So yeah, you've got your wheat and your oat component in there for sure. It's definitely detectable. And then yeah, on top of that, you get a little bit of sweetness. And the sweetness in this one is interesting because you are getting that little bit of like Werther's Original Butter Candy Butterscotch that you'd associate with the New England IPAs, but you're also getting that more straight sweet caramel biscuity sort of thing that you'd associate with the West Coast IPAs as well. So yeah, there's a little bit of biscuit in there too, McVitie's digestive biscuit. But yeah, the mix of brown sugar in this one is quite interesting. So yeah, all in all, I think the malty side of this one is quite nice. The yeasty side of the beer for me, I think, leans more toward a kind of, yeah, there's a little bit like brown bread and kind of more grainy character coming out of this one. So yeah, there's a bit of brown bread in the back and there was a little bit more graininess in there. And yeah, I think the way that goes together is really, really nice, in fact. Yeah, the yeasty character is quite brown bready, but also quite sweet in a way. I'm curious to see how that's going to turn out in the flavour. But yeah, we've covered the malty and yeasty side of the aroma now. Let's go on to the hoppy side of things. As I've said in many an IPA review before, there are 3 types of hoppings that you can use in IPAs. You've got your early edition hopping, which gives you most of your bitterness and a deeper, danker green component. You've got your late edition hopping, which takes place within the last half hour of the wort boil. That gives you a little bit of bitterness, mainly flavour aroma, and it gives you a brighter green component. Then you've got dry hopping, which takes place after the wort boil is complete. And that's all about flavour and aroma. So West Coast IPAs tend to use all 3 types of hopping, which is why they're deeper, danker, and more bitter. And New England hazy IPAs, tend to rely on late edition and dry hopping, which is why they're kind of softer and more juicy. With this beer being 104 IBUs, I'm guessing that probably they've had to use quite a little bit of early edition hopping in here, because you would use a lot more hops in late edition hopping to equal that kind of bitterness, if you like. So yeah, I think there will be a bit of everything going on with this one, to be honest with you. So the green component for me is actually quite smooth, and it's quite oily as well, and that's because they've used cryo oil in this one. You'll always find that with cryo, it kind of smoothens out the green component a little bit, but you do have a little touch of earthiness in there. That's going to be your mosaic, and then after that it's mainly nice and floral, and again it's quite oily. But yeah, it's got that nice floral aromaticity to it, some nice grassiness as well, which is kind of a little bit zesty in some ways, and I do quite like that. And then yeah, you have this lovely juicy fruity character sitting behind it. Even through smelling all of this, I still think the orange is really quite prominent in this one. I think mosaic is really coming to the fore, but of course behind that You do have some tropical fruit in there. There's a good little bit of passion fruit, of course, juicy mango, apricot, pineapple. I'm not getting the kind of more pungent peach and grapefruit that you can sometimes get at Citra, but and Chinook would give you a little bit of that too. It actually comes across as quite soft and tropical, but yeah, quite an orangey leaning beer, this one, I have to say. So yeah, all in all, the way that this one goes together, I think, is really, really nice. So it gets a big thumbs up from me. Yeah, I like that with this one. The way that it goes together, the aroma is really nice. So as I always say, take a bit of time to enjoy that before you get stuck into it. I think it is about time that we have a taste of this one and see what it's all about. So yeah, this is the Super Hysteric IPA, coming in at 7%, 7.5% ABV, sorry, from Y Market Brewing in Nagoya, Aichi, here in Japan. Slàinte, skål, cheers, kanpai. Ooh, that's good. That is nice. I'm going to say straight away, it does show you that bitterness, but this is also a little bit more of a kind of old school IPA actually. And yeah, it finds a nice balance actually. It comes across as the bitterness and the dryness comes out of this one into the aftertaste right enough, but it does have that little bit of old school West Coasty type mouthfeel to it. But in the aftertaste, it does show you a wee bit more of the New England sort of thing. So yeah, calling this an American IPA, which is somewhere in the middle, I think suits this one quite well, in fact. I'd be curious, I don't know if this, when exactly they would have released this one, but the Hysteric IPA has been around for at least, 5 years. I think I got that within the first or second batch, if I'm not mistaken, back in 2019. But yeah, the way this one goes together, I think, is really, really nice. But yeah, it gives you everything you'd want. Like I say, I think this one is maybe 25% New England, 75% West Coast. I think that's probably a good way to describe the makeup of this particular IPA. But yeah, it is that little bit more bitter, which is kind of interesting. I've not had a beer quite this bitter in a wee while actually. So yeah, kudos to Y Market for trying something a wee bit different. But yeah, let's do as we always do and break the beer down and describe that flavour for you more in depth. Middle third of your palate then, the backbone of the beer is that kind of fresh, it's more of a white bready bread crust actually, so yeah, fresh white bready baguette bread crust in there. Further forward on the middle third of your palate, you get that little touch of woodiness that I always happen to get. Then yeah, there's a kind of smattering of Jacob's cream cracker above that. Then it's all about the bread. There is a tiny little bit of like brown bready character in there, but mainly the barley malt side of this beer is actually quite white bready, and I'm surprised it's not a little bit more oily and sweet actually, because that's really what I expected out of this one. I did expect something a wee bit more kind of just sweeter, in all honesty. So yeah, that does go together really quite nicely. But I will say the breadiness actually into the aftertaste, it shows you that little bit more sweetness as well. So yeah, you do get a wee bit more sweet brown bread out of it into the aftertaste, but yeah, it feels quite white bready when you first take it in. But yeah, there is a slightly more dense white bready character above that, which is again probably due to the wheat. So further back on the palate, it's got a bit more bitiness to it, and further forward it's a little bit smoother. As I've often said, sweeter flavours come out further forward on the palate, more dry and bitter flavours come out further back. Above the wheat, you do get a little bit of oat actually, but the oat is very minimal. You can just feel a little bit of that smooth, slightly creamy oat as you go round down the middle of your palate, and then as you move out toward the edges of your tongue, the oaty layer becomes quite dry. And in honesty, I would maybe question whether there is actually oat in this at all, because I'm getting the flavour a little bit, but the wheat is definitely more prominent in this one. I'm pretty sure there's wheat, but oat, this could be 50-50 to be honest with you. But yeah, I think there is a little touch of oat in this one. But above those layers, you start to get the brown sugary notes out of the beer. So you can feel there's a sort of circle in the middle of your palate there. And so the base layer of that is the kind of McVitie's digestive biscuit, very slightly kind of toasty caramel, honestly. Then maybe as you move a little bit further in, you can feel the sort of Werther's Original butter candy, butterscotchy sort of note, and then right in the dead centre of your palate, you've got the straight up sweet caramel, and that is of course the boozy side of the beer. So yeah. So yeah, the way that one goes together, I think is really quite nice. Yeah, I think that covers everything we need to say about the middle third of your palate. So let's go to the back third of your palate then. So the border region between middle and back third of your palate, you get that nice little bit of bready build up in there. In the base, there's the wee bit of brown bread. The majority of it's taken up by the kind of drier white bread, and you've got the wee bit of wheaty bitiness on the top there. As I've often said, the back third of your palate will give you very similar flavours to the middle third of your palate, just at different intensities. So yeah, the base of that back third of your palate is the white bready bread crust. The crackers above that, you've got a little bit of the brown bready layer. Then the vast majority of it is the kind of white bready barley malt layer, and those layers are of course a bit drier, and then the wheaty side of things just sits on top of that. So you've got that really nice wheaty, bitey kind of character coming out of that one. So yeah, again, the way that goes together, I think, is really nice. So yeah, on top of all of that wheaty bitiness does actually linger into the aftertaste, and the bitterness comes out of it too. But yeah, the yeasty side of this beer then, as I say, that sits on top of the back third of your palate. So the yeasty side of things, it's got a more dense brown bready character at its core. And it's a little bit sweet actually in that sense. And as you move out from that, it's a little bit more of a kind of grainy brown bread that you get. And then yeah, the very edge of it is a little bit more of a, yeah, it's a little bit more of a sort of straight up bread crusty type note as well. So yeah, that's really interesting how that comes out in this one. So yeah, you've got a good mix of things going on. But it doesn't show too much yeasty character actually. That kind of dissipates quite fast, and it leans more toward the sweetness and the bitterness in fact. But yeah, I think we've said everything that we need to about the back third and middle third of your palate. But definitely, yeah, flavour is taller on that back third of your palate. Then as you move further forward into the middle third of your tongue, it just kind of condenses down that little bit more. But yeah, on the hoppy side of things then, it's quite interesting too. So yeah, back corners of the palate, you've got that nice little bit of earthiness in there, and that's the mosaic. But then as you move further forward from that, you very quickly get that deep, dank, piney resin, and it actually starts to get a little bit more floral and aromatic, and it's quite a spicy floral aromaticity that this one has as you reach the kind of front corners of the palate. But round the front curve of the tongue, the beer is definitely a little bit lighter and more grassy, I would say. So yeah, the way that goes together, I think, is it's really quite nice. But yeah, quite an old school West Coast bitter component to this one. I'm surprised actually that is so prominent in this one, because usually the cryo oil would kind of suppress that a wee bit, and it does maybe into the aftertaste, it smooths it out a wee bit. But yeah, the bitterness in this one has quite a big punch to it. So yeah, in all honesty, this is quite an interesting beer. There's a few things going on in here, but it absolutely fits that American IPA generic term that it's been given, just because of the way the different components are. But yeah, let's have a little look at the front third of your palate then, the fruity side of things, just to finish off the flavour section. So border region between middle and front third of your palate. Again, it's bready build up. The brown bread, the white bread taking up the majority, then the wheaty bitiness on top. The base of that front third of your palate is the baguette, kind of white bready bread crust in there. Then yeah, it's the Jacob's cream cracker, the brown bread, the white bread, and then the smoother side of the wheat. Then you've got that nice oily bubble where the juicy fruity esters just roll their way out of the beer. So yeah. Yeah, the fruity side of this one is actually, yeah, quite orangey leaning in a way, but the other parts that you'd expect with the hops that are in there do come out. So if we start at the back of that fruity part of the beer, there's definitely a little bit of a kind of stronger grapefruit in there. As you move further forward, from that, it's got a little bit of peach, some nice juicy mango underneath, and then yeah, as you move further forward, it's got a little bit of apricot as you reach the middle of that front 30 pack. So yeah, you've got grapefruit, peach, mango, apricot. Would I say pineapple? Maybe a little touch of pineapple, and then yeah, as you move it into the front half of that front third of your palate, it's more about the kind of big tangerine, orangey notes. So yeah, the way that all of that goes together, I think, is really quite nice. So yeah, interesting stuff. I have to say that about the way this beer goes together. So yeah, the fruity side of this beer, I think, is really very, very nice. Yeah, it really leans more toward that orangey side of things. I'd be quite curious again to see the brew sheet and see what ratio of things are coming out in this one, but I think the mosaic was pellet, if I remember correctly, rather than being cryo. So maybe there's a little bit of mosaic in the early edition stage as well as the late edition and dry hopping. So yeah, again, as I say, it would be interesting to see the brew sheet to see when and how much of things have been added. But yeah, I really do find this one quite orangey leaning, but the citrusy side of the grapefruit, that pungent grapefruit, really lingers there into the aftertaste too, along with the bitterness. So the Chinook is really showing itself too. Yeah, interesting stuff. So let's round off the review then with a wee quick look at the mouthfeel. So for me, this beer is kind of mid-bodied, maybe pushing toward the top end of mid-bodied. The carbonation does have a little bit of a prickle to it, but the can was a little touch hard as I opened it, so maybe it's been sitting a wee bit. So yeah, there's a little bit of prickle to the carbonation in this one. Again, it feels very clean, which is kind of something you often expect from Japanese beer, because the Japanese say that beer should be clean, should be light and kind of drinkable. So yeah, you have that in here. We know that the IBU in this one is over 100, and you can feel that in this one, but I would point out, I think IBU, it was calculated that the palate could only have 100, or the unit was created on the assumption of 100, and that's how they kind of calculate it. But yeah, high IBU in this one, you can feel that with the piney resin and the floral aromatic spice, and the malty side of the beer, more kind of grainy underneath, smooth in the middle, and a bit toasty and sweet on top. Then you've got that lovely kind of sweet, oily, fruity side of thing out of this one as well. And yeah, there's a mix of tropical fruit in there and the more kind of citrusy fruit as well. So yeah, I like the way that this one goes together actually. So yeah, I think it's really well done, this one. But as I say, a bit drier because of the bitterness and there's a bit of dryness from the kind of bready, wheaty side of this one too. So you've got wheaty bitiness, your big bitter character, and then the grapefruit. So it does have quite a pronounced flavour, this one. So just be aware of that before you buy a can of this one. You might like the more sweet and neutral regular Hysteric IPA. This one is a little bit more punchy, if you like, but still, I've enjoyed it, and that's the main thing. So yeah, I think we can leave it at that for this one. This one was the Super Hysteric IPA at 7.5% ABV from Y Market Brewing in Nagoya. Aichi here in Japan. Really cool to return to these guys after quite some time, and like I said, hopefully we can do some out and about videos involving these guys, so we'll see if we can make that happen. But thank you again for watching my beer reviews. Until next time, please like, subscribe, share, all the usual YouTube stuff. Let me know your own thoughts on this beer in the comment section below. Let me know what your favourite beers are from Y Market Brewing too, and we will return to these guys again at some point very soon. Until then though, check out my social media, check out theirs, and I'll see you guys in another review. Slàinte, skål, cheers, and see you later. Kanpai.